So I would like to add on to that. And some of the more recent questions on the chat are also in that light, right?
Yes, please, Shruti. I was just going to say these questions are pouring in. So in your response, if you could address some of these too, that would be
I'm going to
terrific.
address some of these. And I think Hugh and Sophia, and I think there's a couple of others here that talk about sort of organizational limitations or organizational challenges that people are facing in terms of either being very early in their digitization journey or not understanding how to justify some of these applications to their leadership teams. And I think the precursor to this is sort of what Hooman said, right? Break down the ML vision into a smaller problem. Don't start with digital twins, obviously, because they're the horizon level problems to solve, but introducing the infrastructure layer to say, okay, we have retrieve fair data practices that are necessary and required across the organization, to what Ramila was just mentioning. And then take it one step forward by saying, here, now that we've collected all the data, we can derive all of these insights that we didn't already know, or would have taken us 6 months to at least retrieve these insights. And then take it, like, there are multiple different applications that you can provide to your organizational leadership that has nothing to do with digital twins, but will set you up on the journey to utilizing digital twins or implementing digital twins and ML applications across the organization. And again, I think it's not a hard sell in today's market, because every president and CEO of every pharma company is basically saying we're going to use AI in 2025. That's the goal for us. So I'd say just capitalize on providing impactful applications that are base level and provide sort of cost-effective strategies and saying, here's the amount of time reduced, here's the amount of cost reduced in doing these things. And again, establishing data infrastructure and partnering with IT organizations and identifying key leaders on that side and saying, here, can you provide me this infrastructure as an example of case, and say, here's how much we are actually improving cost implementation. And again, it depends on where you sit within the organization as well, because if you're sitting within a centralized technology organization, it becomes easier because you have better access to sort of AWS or cloud resources. A lot of them are much more accessible to you. But if you're sitting in application organizations, like most of us are, like cell therapies or MSAT or any of these application organizations, you have to find key partners across the table and say, hey, can we partner to actually establish this POC and then bring it up to the leadership? Because once you've already established your POCs and shown improvement, there's no way any leadership team will say, okay, no, this is not going to be something that we're going to implement or use in. And again, to answer Sophia's question, quantifying the ROI of digital twin implementation, what are the KPIs we would consider? I'd say KPIs are, again, any CEO or any leadership team member, if you say cost reduction, FTE reduction, and time reduction, those are the three key KPIs that everybody is aiming to meet, no matter what technology that you're looking for. And in terms of quantifying ROIs, it could be any one of those three, a combination of all those three, but also depends on sort of what the use case and application is. If you're looking for process optimization, then your KPI is pretty simple. I'd say there is a large-scale expectation for these KPIs to be double digits at least, the ROIs to be double digits at least. So I'm not entirely sure we're there yet. The majority of the digital map doesn't exist in most organizations to have that. But I'd say that's kind of how I would approach these things.
Yeah, I just would like to add things. I love everyone what just mentioned, and I think it kind of covers several key points, like about what's the key elements to develop and implement the digital twin, especially the industrialization. I think these are kind of a really like holistic, right? We need experts, right? And we need people. I think one of the questions people asking, right, how to get the operator, right, training. So that's kind of a one element considering the upskill training, right, operators, and also other like engineerings and everyone who is in this support system. Like we have the really this kind of a multi-disciplinary team, right? I think to implement, right? Like Ramila mentioned, it is industrialization. It's really, and later on, like not only process monitoring, but also process control. And how do you realize that the ultimate a goal, right? And you need engineering, you need the automation team, you need the ITS, right? The all the infrastructure, the data management system, and also the IT all the infrastructure that in place. So all the things that really the keys how to realize, not like Shruti mentioned, that it's very kind of a lot of enthusiasm in this space. Everyone wants to use the digital twin, but how to get there, right? That's a lot of the key elements everybody just mentioned. That's very key to the journey.
Yeah, I want to tack on one more question on here. Ruturaj asks, what do you think AI will change the situation of bioprocess? I think that's a horizon level question. That's what everybody is hoping for in general, I would say. But I think all of us have touched on this a little bit. I think the advent of AI and the advancements of AI are more to improve capabilities and enablement, not to really change the situation in bioprocesses, but more to augment what we're doing and accelerate what we're doing in significant ways. And I think Laura also asks, how would you quantify ROI when the models provide new insights and our process understanding? And I think it is a hard problem to solve. You can't explain to somebody that this piece of technology is showing us something that we didn't already know, which will be useful in the future. And it could be useful in the future. And that is exactly what all of our organizations are doing. We are spending the effort and money in researching new drugs to be starting with. And that is on the promise that something new will come in. And so you have to sell it with that perspective, saying, look, you spend money on research in general. This is a different kind of research, but we will provide the promise of something that you don't already have.
I was going to say, isn't learning something that you didn't already know a good thing? Like generally, I'm speaking at a
that's why we all went to space, right? We started with those kinds of questions, right? That's the framework. Every research organization sits on identifying something that we don't already know. And mechanistic models, not to discount them, also are based off of those kinds of discovery research, right? So I'd say really every kind of science is to discover something you don't already know. So
yeah. All right, great. I can't believe how fast time is flying right now. We're going to run short on time here, so I'm gonna move on just for a minute, and then we're going to revisit some audience questions, and maybe talk a little bit about the regulatory paradigm, where there was a ton of interest pre-event around what's going on in the regulatory environment. But Miles, if we can jump to polling question 2, this one again is for the audience. What's holding your deployment of mechanistic modeling and digital twins back? Choose all that apply. You can choose as many as you want. Budgetary constraints, lack of talent and expertise. We talked a lot about the multidisciplinary requirements here. Maybe you just don't have some of that expertise. Lack of data. You need a Ramila on your team. Lack of access to data, lack of management support, no clearly defined use case or other. Go ahead and make some selections there, and we'll take a look at the results in just a minute. And then, like I said, I want to talk about regulatory before we run out of time, but I like Nimath's question. That just came in here. While we're all in for digital twin implementation, can we please discuss the risk associated, limitations of its usage in GMP and process development? I think it's an important question. Like, what are the potential roadblocks or challenges that you're obviating for? Shruti, I'm going to start with you since you're big on my screen.
Yeah, I think there are, with any technology comes risks and comes limitations, right? One of the biggest limitations for any kind of technology implementation is data and infrastructure related. Obviously, Ramila and Hooman and Yuanyuan, everybody has touched on it pretty significantly. I'd say while we are in the innovative era of AI implementation across every industry, the pharma industry is still sort of catching on to the digitization and digital transformation aspects. From what I can observe, not everybody has a standardized extensive infrastructure. So that is definitely one of the biggest roadblocks, understandably. In terms of risks associated with and limitations of its usage in process development, I can answer. I think personally, the biggest challenges is also convincing the scientists and the shop floor people or the manufacturing folks that this is a piece of technology that will help you. That comes with sort of any kind of technology in general, and that's the digital transformation challenge that everybody is facing within pharma right now, in saying, okay, even if I were to develop the best digital twin, will the lab scientist actually use it? I don't know. I'd say yes, because we hopefully provided the data package to say, yes, here are all the things that it can do. And we've included them in the development process and saying, yeah, here are things that we are using your knowledge to develop these digital twins so that it actually does what you need it to do in real life rather than what I think it needs to be doing as a data scientist, right? So those are the two things that I would say are sort of the biggest challenges from a technology perspective. Obviously, in the last year, we've seen a significant amount of resource cut down across the board in the organizations, across all pharma organizations. So I'd say resource constraint is one of the other biggest challenges at the moment, because again, with the layoffs and with all of the resource constraints and everybody tightening purses after the pandemic, I'd say because the digital twins are not showing immediate impact and value in the next year or two, the investment in these areas is probably going to be lower for the next 2 years until the market recovers overall.
Yeah, thank you, Shruti. Hooman, I'd like you to weigh in on this one.
Matt, I think this is perhaps the best place to transition eventually to the FDA perspective on all of this, right? And I'm going to refer to the FDA guideline that was released recently, and they explicitly talk about some of the challenges, right? So the first one, data variability, quality, and bias. We talked about this quite a lot. I'm not just going to go over this again. Shruti did a great job of just really mentioning how we are constrained a lot of the times, but by model-ready data. We do have a lot of data, but is it suitable for building a mechanistic model, statistical model, or the digital twin? That's a completely different question. So the second challenge is about the how do you explain the methodology behind all these models, right? For someone who does not have the required background. That communication piece, that's something that takes a lot of time and effort, right? The third piece of it is that the potential performance drift, especially in the manufacturing space, when the input data changes, and if the model or digital twin is set so it adapts itself to the incoming new data, that means that the performance could change over time. So how do you explain this to the regulatory regulatory agencies, right? And the fourth piece, which is, I think it's a major challenge or limitation here, is that you need to have a very clear life cycle defined for all of these models. And how do you maintain and manage that life cycle? That's something that requires a lot of resources and careful attention here. So I think I'm just going to answer perhaps the next potential question is that, okay, given all these limitations, how do we move towards a more suitable environment from an FDA perspective for developing and implementing digital twins? I think the key here is we want to get involved and engage FDA on these conversations as early as possible. There are different programs within the FDA that are related to digital twins, not specifically digital twins, but in general, digital space. And we should find a suitable one and then just engage with them, have conversations with them. If implementing in the GMP space is our ultimate goal. And that way, hopefully, when this two-way conversation is established, both parties get to advance in this space. And hopefully we get to a space and to a point that there are clear instructions on how we can develop and implement and maintain these capabilities.
Yeah, I agree.
I just want to add sorry about that. I just want to add it about the, I think that Shruti mentioned is kind of get the buy-in from inside, and Hooman and kind of emphasize the, how to get the buy-in from the outside, right? It is particularly the FDA buy-in is very, very important, especially the GMP aspect. So I think for, kind of this is really the things that like Hooman mentioned, we have to engage the people like earlier. I think throughout the stages, like model development, right? Model verification and validation, and then like speaking of, and then later on, you deploy the model. There's like life cycle management throughout the product life cycle. So all these kind of the aspects we kind of really need a kind of holistic strategy and how to get buy-in from aspect. Speaking of the FDA requirements, right? The compliance. So we really need those like data infrastructure and ITF infrastructure and in place and to be able to secure all the requirements that the FDA required our model, right? I think the kind of the auditory trail, like all the data, all the kind of compliance related, how to get the things like compliance and also secured. So I think that those are really the kind of key elements that we need to really think through, right? Not wait until the last point when we trying to get something in the GMP.
I'm telling you, it more often than not, whether we're talking about technologies and bioprocess development and manufacturing or new modalities, I feel like the FDA conversation is that classic analogy of like building the landing gear on the plane while the plane's in the air, right? Like that's where we're at.
We're learning as we go.
Yeah, 100%. It's something that my boss actually says is we're building the plane as we fly it. So that's even a step behind what you were saying. The landing gear is still.
We're not quite ready to put the wheels on yet.
Yes. I think, yes, you're right. And then a lot of the FDA guidance has to be developed, like Hooman said, in partnership with them. And in the recent guidance, but also in the past guidance in the last year or two about quality by design. Somebody on the questions also mentioned AI using digital twins as quality by design. It is, however, there's a lot of newer guidance and they are sort of key partners that they are identifying within the FDA organization, and the FDA organization is also very aware that they don't have all the information about these kinds of technologies and how they would affect sort of product development or manufacturing or optimization in general, and they are willing to come to the table and say, okay, let's sit down and understand, and then we will develop a guidance based off of that, right? And again, 20 years ago, cell therapies needed the same kind of FDA partnership to be actually implemented in real life. So I'd say a lot of these FDA guidance and regulatory guidance is sort of coming through from a partnership standpoint. And we should, as organizations, leverage a lot of that from sort of even the model development phase, where we have to include the scientists in the model development phase for the use case definition and understanding the data and understanding the use case effectively, but also start including the regulatory folks within the organization and saying, hey, here are things that we're developing. Here's the end goal for these kinds of things. What are guardrails from your perspective that we can start implementing, so that the regulatory folks within the organization also start to think and capitalize and establish some of those relationships outside.